The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, along with former Oshkosh Mayor and City Councilwoman Melanie Bloechl. We're very pleased to be joined on this edition of Eye on Oshkosh by the Democratic candidate, one of two Democratic candidates for the 53rd Assembly District, Steve Dedow. Steve is president of the Winnebago County Labor Council. He's running on a platform of restoring manufacturing jobs, not just to our county and the district that he would be serving, but the entire state, and I would venture to say probably nation as a whole. And also focusing on issues that directly affect each and every one of us, rather than some of these rather insignificant measures that we've seen come forward in recent months. Would that be a fair assessment?
In a nutshell, perfect.
Okay. See, this is why they pay me the big bucks on
It
this
must
show.
be, yeah.
You get paid.
Oh, you didn't get your most recent
No,
check?
no.
Oh, I'll talk to the powers that be about that. Steve is seeking to unseat the incumbent, Carol Owens. However, he will be facing another Democratic challenger, as I mentioned, that person being Luann Byrd. Luann, for most of you who are probably aware out there, was on one of our recent shows. So, Steve, welcome to the show. This is your second time around. You were here probably about 10 months ago, right after you announced, and you announced relatively early that you were, I think you were one of the first people out of the chute saying that you were going to run. You know, in that amount of time, what's been going on with the campaign? How's it going?
Campaign's been going very good. We've been fairly aggressive on things. We've done a number of unconventional things, 33-mile walk from Oshkosh to Waupun, which was interesting. I'm sure I can look back in 20 years and go, oh, geez, that was stupid. But no, actually, I'm kidding. It was quite an insightful thing. You get out in the middle of nowhere, and you're walking and stuff, and you're trying to meet people and handing out literature. And one thing I noticed out there is there's two types of people: people that have security bars on their doors, and people that have their doors wide open. And I think that that's kind of the way that it is with our entire nation. That there's just two types of people that are afraid and people that are not afraid. And I was, you know, you kind of think about things when you're out walking on this, and I kind of put that in my quiver just to remember. And we've done other things, unconventional. I fell a couple of weeks ago, 145 feet free fall into an air mattress at a fundraiser. That was interesting.
Wow, I was hoping that was like something you planned.
Well, it was. One of our staff people suggested that, you know, to demonstrate that leadership is an inherent part, or, you know, risk is an inherent part of leadership, that you should do something like this. And next time, of course, they can.
They can take the fall, right?
But along the way, we picked up over 30 endorsements. The state AFL-CIO endorsed this campaign, the earliest that it's ever endorsed any campaign in the state's history. The building trades did the same. We've picked up organizations, politicians. The Lake Winnebago Green Party also endorsed a Democratic candidate, which is unprecedented in this area. And that is what we're trying to accomplish. That's what we're going to have to accomplish, to unseat an incumbent in this district. There hasn't been a Democrat in this seat since 1934, 70 years.
Wow.
And William Grimes. I looked him up in the library.
Wow.
And of course, running against a 12-year incumbent and a 74-year-old grandmother is always a hard sell anyway. But we're going to have an umbrella, and that's what we're getting. We're getting a coalition of people basically that are moderate Republicans, Green Party people, prison guards, union people, the farmers. This is what we're going to need.
What are these people, you know, I know that when you go out and you're campaigning, a part of that campaigning is going to special interest groups or having them ask you to come into them, fill out their surveys, you know, give talks in front of their leadership. What kind of things are these different organizations looking for from their leadership, and what are they finding in you that they're endorsing? What is it that they say that they want from Steve Dedow that you can actually deliver for them?
I think most of the surveys, quite frankly, Melanie, end up in the waste
Circular
basket.
file?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a few that I fill out. The people that are asking me to come and speak are a wide range of people. There's a lot of organized labor, but there's also other things. And I think what they find is, I've been told over the last 5-6 months that I'm somewhat of a dynamic speaker. And I think a lot of it is I've never written a speech, and I like to just review subjects and then talk about what I learned. And I think what happens is people see a person who is coming off a little bit less rehearsed and maybe a little bit more passionate about some of the things, and a lot more passionate about some things, I know for sure. And I've been told that I'm a newcomer as far as like a unifier, that I speak truth to power, that I don't care about what I say to power. I've had a state senator get up and leave one of my speeches, which is always encouraging. And I think that that's what needs to happen here. I think being an outsider like I am, I've never run for political office before, and if I don't win this time, I don't plan on running again. It gives me kind of an edge to just go all out on this. And I consider myself a citizen's candidate, and I'm going to speak what I think people not want to hear, but what they need to hear.
They need to know certain things.
Yes.
What did you say, if you can give me an example and if you can recall, when you have a state senator that walks out of a public speaking engagement? What did you say that got somebody so upset that they wanted to walk out? What did Steve Dedow do this time? Because I find this intriguing as heck.
It had to do with Assembly Joint Resolution 66, which is the Defense of Marriage Act. And there was a couple of other things in there that the Republicans were pushing at pretty hard at that time. And I believe I opened the speech with something about a well-oiled hate machine down in Madison, and it kind of progressed or degressed or regressed from there. And they found it somewhat offensive and left. I had a standing ovation. That was the only person who found it offensive. But that's the way I see it.
Making friends, huh?
Yeah.
That's my Steve.
Just a couple of basic type questions, Steve. Now, we mentioned in the opening that you've been here before. For anyone who maybe missed that show, why don't you just take a moment and kind of tell folks a little bit more than what I did about who Steve Dedow is, and also, you know, the 53rd Assembly District, while it covers a sliver of Oshkosh, it's really very spread out, a lot of communities, in particular rural areas.
Yes.
How are you getting your message out to people when it is so spread out?
One of the main reasons, or one of the main things we're doing to get the message out, is direct mailings. We've mailed out, I believe it's a little over 8,000 mailings now already. And I've attended, I think there's a total of 21 town boards and city councils to attend, and I've done 17 of those, and I plan on reaching out to the last 4. And you go to these places, and sometimes I say things, sometimes I don't. And I know a lot of politicians go out and they want to talk, and that's not always the best thing to do. How can you fix things if you don't know what's broke? You go out to the town of New Pieskin, say, which is out by Rush Lake, and their set of problems, while similar, is different than the town of Utica or the town of Springvale down in Fond du Lac County, that kind of thing. And what you find out here in all these towns, they're very caring people. This is democracy at its basis level. And what I'm hearing out there is a lot of anger directed toward the state on certain levels, especially on these open meetings laws that they're supposed to adhere to. And I might add that we are crafting a resolution right now which is going around to Winnebago County. Fond du Lac County has passed it, which basically says that the state legislature has to abide by the same rules of open meetings that they're imposing on the cities, counties, and towns. And these people out here are overwhelmingly in support of this kind of stuff, and rightly so. That's one of the things that we're doing, is going out and reaching out and trying to see some of the things that are problematic for them. Town of Amarillo, I was out there, a terrible day. It was raining, one of those ice rain things last year. And there was like maybe 6, 7 people there, plus myself. And a gentleman got up and was kind of complaining to the chairman out there about, he'd put a culvert in or allowed a culvert to go in, and now his lawn was flooding over and all this other stuff. And the chairman's like, well, we'll look into it, Dick. We'll get down, we'll get a guy down here. And that's really what it's about, is this accountability, which we don't have anymore from Madison. It's like, like with the leach situation, here. Where are these people? They're supposed to be here. There are representatives. They should be showing some concern about this. When it's politically expedient or something maybe to gain from it, then there's some kind of reaction or something, And I'm not really raking on the incumbents from these areas about that. I realize that their time is, eaten up with some of this stuff, but there was problems at Leach before this, months ago, and when Federal Signal bought them out, there was problems. And there's problems with Arvin Meritor, and there's problems with other manufacturing in this town that they should be addressing months ago. And maybe this could have been avoided. And that, I think, is one of the things that people who are inundated or at least initiated into our campaign, for lack of a better word, find somewhat of appealing, is that I listen to what they're saying, and then I try to go home, do some research on it, and try to come up with it. I like twisting things around and trying to figure out a different way, a different perspective. There's got to be a different perspective, because if what we're doing down in Madison is the be-all, end-all, I mean,
we're in a lot of trouble.
I mean, we really are. It's either political and special interest groups have got so much control, or B, everybody down there is incompetent. And I would hate to think that it's really either of those two things. Maybe it's a combination, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think that we really do need to listen to our constituents more. And you got to be out amongst them to do this.
So who is Steve Dedow, and other than someone who thinks outside the box?
Well, I'm president of Winnebago County Labor Council. I've been in organized labor for 18 years, treasurer for the 6th Congressional Committee on Political Education. I'm vice president of my local, which is the stagehands union here. I am a union stagehand. As I said before, tomorrow I'll be the job steward on Van Halen. I was driving forklift out at EAA today. It's an interesting job. Problems every day somewhat, but there's solvable problems, and then you go home and the show is gone until next year, so it's kind of nice. I've never run for political office before, but I've always been involved in politics in one way or other. I've always been somewhat of a believer of underdogs, always. And I think that what comes with that, I know for myself that it was in '63 that John Kennedy I heard speaking on the TV, and even though I was 8 or 9, it made a difference. What the man was saying was about reaching out to space, and at that time, of course, I was into the space thing. But also about not, what it is that we can do, or your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country, and what he wanted to do with people who didn't have as much, and tried to make this society better than it is, with educational reforms and with all these different reforms that he saw. And that's what affected me. It really did. I had a series of teachers which helped that as well, pushing me to read, and I still read voraciously. And I started going off into tangents on Niccolo Machiavelli and all these different political people, and I've got a pretty well-rounded background in politics, and a lot of what I see it's just rehashed history. I mean, it really is, I guess that's who I am.
Okay. What in particular do you see? I know you've said that there's no accountability in state government anymore. What in particular is it about Carol Owens, the incumbent, that really has you fired up? What is the burr that has got under your saddle about this?
I think, I know Carol Owens, and I've known her for years and stuff, and I don't think that she's a vindictive woman or a mean woman. I think that what happens is that there's just nothing getting done for this area. And last year, Owens did not pass anything of any value at all. She passed, I think it was 2 resolutions, one of which informs us that the ancient Macedonians are indeed Hellenistic in nature, which was Assembly Resolution 30, and the other one was St. David's Day is now on March 1st, which is Assembly Resolution 64. You know, hopefully you guys got time and a half for that day. The rest of it was...
I didn't even know there was such a thing as St. David's Day. See, this is what
it's not
happens
on
when
my
you're a
cal-
Lutheran.
Well,
It's
absolutely.
not on my calendar.
But those are 2 things that she did get pushed through, but all the other things that she put out there didn't. And some of the things that she was pushing out there, AB 67, the Conscience Clause bill. I mean, just in a nutshell, if you're a pharmacist, you don't have to give out contraceptive to people if you find it morally objectionable. You don't have to give them information about Planned Parenthood. To me, it's a common sense thing. It's like if I worked in the Winchester manufacturing plant and I was really against guns or something. Well, quit.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like I need to have legislation for this, right? It's things like that that I keep seeing coming down. I don't think that we need to have those kind of things. She tried to legislate this courtesy law a few years ago for school kids to say sir and madam and things like this. And we don't need the government in our lives telling us this kind of minutia. What we need is some economic stimulus. We need some health care things. We need some some things for agriculture. There's things that we do need, and that's what government should be about. It shouldn't be about all these other ridiculous things that we're getting into, you know.
Well, I have a question for you, because one of the things that was printed in the Oshkosh Northwestern not too terribly long ago was kind of a scathing editorial by Stu Rickman about politicians.
Can't believe that.
I know, scathing and Stu Rickman. You wouldn't put those two together. But it was about Children's Day parades, and 'tis the season for the politicians to basically be coming out of the woodwork and the porta potties, and basically really kind of pounding people who are running for office or who have run for office, and to kind of leave people alone at these special events. He also talked about politicians using the Leach Company or the Signal Federal or Federal Signal debacle to their benefit. You talked about Leach, and you've been very involved, because I knew you before you even ran for office. You've always been very involved with labor. You stated that you've known that there's been problems, and has everyone, that there have been problems over there for some time. Should there have been something that representatives should have been doing prior to all of this coming to pass? Or is this just basically a fair market seeing its way to the end result? And what I mean by that is, the Leach family owned this company for what, 150 years, something to that end? They decide to sell it. They get good stock, everybody's happy, they get their money, and they sell off to someone else. No harm, no foul. I mean, that is what we're supposed to be led to believe. We should hold the Leach family harmless. Gee whiz, they did right by us for 150 years by providing jobs and benefits and so forth. What are we all getting so mad at them for? How do you see that?
Well, to go back to your first thing about Stu Rickman, just so I can mark it off my list here. I guess I kind of take offense about what Rickman was saying about the politicians being out there. First off, I really do believe that politicians need to be out there, and not just on these events when it comes, election time, but they need to be walking around among people anytime that they can, really, just to find out what's out there. And for an editor of our local paper to be saying that politicians should be leaving people alone, to me, with this whole media thing and Clear Channel and all this control, and Gannett itself, owning all these papers, there's less and less outlets for anybody who's outside the box, or certainly not with the mainstream, to get any kind of a viewpoint out. And I think that unless we want to just totally trust the Oshkosh Northwestern and have them tell us who to vote for, that the politicians better keep going out and knocking on doors and interrupting people's days. I mean, there's a way to do it, without being blatantly crass and stuff, You can be polite while you're out talking to people and just kind of move into conversations and things. I know that when I'm out, I usually initiate or engage in conversations that attract other people around, and they seem to appreciate it. It's not like they tell me to go away or anything.
Yeah.
As far as the leach thing, yes, months ago, you talk to these people, and through the Labor Council, Darrell Ader, who's president of 1108 out there. What I'm hearing from the rank and file and have heard is that the leach company, the founders and Old Man Leach and stuff like this were all very good to their employees. That where some of the problem lied was in the children. That there was more compensation going to the CEOs and less upgrades of machinery out there. And what happened when Federal Signal bought it out was that they bought a company that should have had its machinery upgraded already to make it competitive on a global environment, at least more competitive with a global environment. Never before in America's history have we had a problem with the cost of our labor versus the rest of the world. We've never had a problem with this. We could have done this in the 40s. Well, maybe not the 40s or World War II, the 30s, the 20s. We could have been taking things over to countries that are third world countries that could have paid less than the United States, but we never thought about doing this, And one of the things that we should have done at Leach, in my opinion, is that this equipment should have been upgraded. Now, I'm not sure where Federal Signal plays into this, but I do know this, that one of the things that we're trying to launch is something called SAMA, which is the Save American Manufacturers Act, which is an Assembly joint resolution I'd like to send out once I get into office. And it talks about something called the MEP, Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which the Bush administration has slashed by 80%. And I'll try to keep this painless.
Okay.
What this partnership does is it pours money, federal funds, into small and intermediate-sized manufacturing companies to allow them to upgrade their equipment so they can maintain competitiveness on a global level, right? Another thing that's in here is it removes any taxpayer money at all being used for loans to send companies out of the country. Right now, companies are encouraged to move. They use taxpayer dollars to send them out of the country. Another thing I'd like to see happen is that there should be import tariffs on stuff that you want to move your company over to Bangladesh, then you're going to pay an import tariff coming back in. And that's what needs to happen.
Amen.
In my opinion. And this is one of the things that could have happened with Leach. And one of the things that I've heard from the gentlemen out there that are working out there is that because the machinery was antiquated, that they started outsourcing, the company started outsourcing parts, right, jobs, so that the people out there literally would be waiting for an hour or two, standing around waiting for trucks to come in with outsourced parts so that they could be assembled or put into the machinery that they're manufacturing out there. Productivity is crashing here. And this is like stuff like this MEP, we should be fully funding this. Why are we cutting this? To give what, tax breaks again to people who are making, it's just ridiculous.
What kind of, because that sounds like a really wonderful thing. I'd not heard of that before. What kind of support has there been for that legislation?
None. This is the first time I talked about it.
Well, all right.
Breaking news on Oshkosh.
Breaking news, yes. Well, all right. Let's gaze into your crystal ball. What kind of, you've seen how these politicians operate. Quite often, it's business as usual. What kind of support do you think you'll be able to muster for something like that if you're elected, or even if you're not elected?
The sad truth, I'm not a moron. There's a protocol that's down in Madison, as there is in Washington, that if you want me to support this, well, then you're going to have to support this for me, that kind of a thing. And I realize that. I would like to think that that we can create some bipartisanship down there. I think that accountability, I think campaign finance reform, there's a number of things that have to happen. Nobody wants to touch this. To me, when you look back to the great leaders, and not just from this country, from not people like Adams and Jefferson and Aaron Burr and Hamilton, these people are all, but there's other people in other countries. Leadership is about making tough decisions, and it's not about always doing what's populist. And everybody's so concerned about their job, these career politicians, just about their job. And looking at this in the brief months that I've been running on this, you know, in the campaign, I mean, it's insane. It's a 2-year position, and you're campaigning 1 year out of the deal. They tell me that I can't be competitive in my campaign unless I raise $40,000. Well, you get paid $40,000 for the job. Well, you know, it's just a bunch of ludicrous things in here. I'm not saying they should raise the amount that the legislators are getting. I mean, this is a public service thing. I don't need a job. I want this job. Because I think I can make a difference down there. And one of the things that I would try to do is to instill some sort of camaraderie here, and I think I can.
How could, and Cheryl brings up a good point here, Steve. This is something that's pro-American, pro-worker.
Right.
How if...
And pro-business, actually.
Pro-business, because if you're going to stay here and do business here, you're going to be compensated fairly, you won't be penalized, correct? But if you decide that you're going to go and get cheaper labor and go overseas or wherever, you're going to be penalized. So you're actually encouraging Wisconsin manufacturing, Wisconsin jobs, Wisconsin tax base, and encouraging people to support their compadres here in Wisconsin. As a politician, I'm trying to look at this because politicians are always looking at how is this going to affect me? You know, how will this... What I'm trying to say here is, how could you possibly be against something that's pro-Wisconsin, pro-American, pro-worker? I mean, we are the backbone of this United States. You don't get anything done unless there's somebody turning the ratchet.
Well,
I know we're not real popular and our fingernails get kind of dirty and we get sweaty brows and stuff. And, you know, when we're done with a day's work, we have to take a shower and use some soap because we really worked for it.
Yeah.
Why is that not translating today? Why is being a blue-collar worker a dirty word? Because I keep hearing people say, well, we have to renaissance into the technology era. Well, I've got nothing against technology. Do I know how to do it all? No, and we have people here who can certainly attest to that. But what is wrong with still having a manufacturing base? I mean, why has that become such a dirty, dirty thing?
I really don't know. To me, it seems like class, just a division of class, you know.
Do you believe that we're going to, is manufacturing going by the wayside? I mean, it just all of a sudden one day in the United States of America, no one's going to manufacture anything.
I can't believe it, because quality here is better. Our educational systems are better. We have a history, a heritage of this, especially in the Great Lakes region. Wisconsin, I think it's some 515,000 jobs in this state are manufacturing based. And then you've got all the little jobs, you know. My grandpa taking me out in the garage and stuff and showing me how to do stuff with sheet metal and tin snips, you know. This area is manufacturing. You don't think about that down in Alabama. You think about agriculture, textiles. This is where the Germans and settled and stuff who still have a history of this, BMW and that kind of stuff in Germany. And I don't think that we're going to end up with no manufacturing here. I think that if we do this, if we keep going the way that we're going, there's going to be a problem with this. And talking to some people at Oshkosh Truck, there was a story that was relayed to me on this. I'll try to make it short. That during Libya's situation back in the 80s and stuff, that Oshkosh Truck had an order from Libya. And the U.S. government came in and they were rooting around. They wanted to find out, you know, well, you guys can't sell these trucks to Libya because, you know, they're on our list of bad people. And Oshkosh Truck talked about it a bit, and he went back to the U.S. government and said, well, wouldn't it be better to have us sell the trucks to Libya than some other company? That way we could control the parts if the trucks break down, you know. And the U.S. government said, yes, this makes sense, this is good. Now the exact opposite is happening. Now we're having components made in our military system by China, by other countries that now they control the parts on our stuff. Oh, and if we continue down this line, at least in my sense of reasoning here, we're going to be at the mercy of not only economic but other muscle here.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you know, it was interesting, and then I'm going to let Cheryl take over here. Russ Feingold has been having these commercials on TV. I don't know if you've seen them lately.
I haven't. I've heard about them.
that are actually, he's always a very creative guy when it comes to TV commercials. And one of the things that he talks about in one of his TV commercials is how he's tried to save manufacturing jobs in the state of Wisconsin. And he talks about the GMC Janesville plant.
Right.
And that's great. But again, do we have the opportunity to save these leach jobs? I mean, are they gone forever? Because as it stands right now, we keep reading in the paper, well, Greg Underheim's been working with this one or that one. Well, coming in after the fact, and we had this with Arvin Meritor, where we had council members and mayors who didn't want to get involved because, of course, this is a private negotiation between union and their labor force, and gee whiz, we don't want to get involved and step on anybody's toes. Do you think that there's any chance that we can save these jobs, or have we lost 190 jobs and families affected, plus the 50 or so that were lost previous to that, and then they called all those guys back and they left their other jobs? I mean, that is as dirty as it gets, as far as I'm concerned. That's just dirty doings.
Well, I agree, and that's part of the thing that, for me, on city government level and on corporate accountability, there needs to be some things looked at. Corporations come into cities, and they basically invade communities, and we fall over backwards on the state, on the local levels. TIF districts and tax incentives and all this other stuff. Where's the commitment back from the companies that are coming into us? Are you going to be here 18 months or 18 years? Are you going to be here? I mean, there's got to be something here. Otherwise, they're just coming in and taking land from us, destroying these jobs. What do they get from it?
They buy themselves time until they can get to where they have to go, and that would be Canada, it sounds like, here.
Yeah, that's a absolutely different point, too. You'd think,
Yeah.
you hear about it going to, Bangladesh or Cambodia.
Honduras,
exactly.
That was the other thing Russ Feingold showed. He said, what's wrong with this picture? I'm paraphrasing because I don't think I have it exactly right. But he held up a United States flag, and he flipped it over, and on the tag it said, "Made in China."
Yeah, we won't fly. The only thing we fly at our house is made in the USA. And right now there's a "Don't Tread on Me" flag flying out there. And it's made in the USA by the Quinn Flag Company. To talk about your leach thing, if I was at some degree of influence in the city right now, I guess where I would be Oshkosh Truck. And I would be asking Truck what their contracts look like, what their expansion looks like, and these kind of things. Because if Oshkosh Truck wants to add more jobs out there, they got 190 skilled machinists who are waiting for a new job. And that's where I would send those people, is to Oshkosh Truck, and try to assimilate them in there. Because that's where the ethics are. That's where the skill level is. If we don't do something like that, that's where I would be looking. The leach situation, we can try to bend over backwards and throw millions of dollars in this to try to keep federal signal here. If we can do that successfully, that's fine. If somebody knows has a magic bullet of doing that, that's fine. But apparently, federal signal has already made up their mind. They're going to move out of here.
Are you upset with the leach company for this happening? Do you feel as though they bear any accountability or responsibility in this?
I don't know the story well enough. I certainly don't bear any ill will to somebody to sell a company. I mean, that's what capitalism's about, and if you get to a point where your company is successful and you want to sell it out, well, of course you got that right.
Okay.
I don't bear any ill will like that. What I see over and over again is you were talking about technology before. I just got to put this in there before I forget this.
Sure.
I was out at a West Side Business Association thing. I think my dad took me out to earlier this year, and they were talking about the need. We got to get technology jobs in. Wisconsin's got to become more technologically adept and stuff. We have to educate people and get these jobs in here because they're good paying jobs. And they're absolutely right. But the sad fact was, I think I was the only person in the room who realized that the reason that their PowerPoint presentation didn't work is because there was no batteries in the remote. And it's hard to listen to people talk about technology when they don't have a clue, and that's what I see happening in a lot of different management level things. They come up with these plans which are supposed to be brilliant, but they don't go outside the cubicle. They don't get on the forklift. They don't go out to the loading docks or out to the machines or the lathes or where people are working. And that's where you got to do it. The old foremans, the old managers, that's the way they did it. And
Yeah.
that's how these companies were built,
Right.
you know.
Couldn't have batteries.
Steve, we had some viewer questions that were emailed into us, and I wanted to run through some of these kind of quickly, I guess, so we've got more time to talk about some of your ideas and platforms and so forth. The first one is Representative Owens. Pardon me, has not always been real responsive to some constituents' needs. Will you return calls to people in your district, and will you try to get results even if you don't necessarily politically agree with the person?
Well, I would certainly return somebody's call. If they call up and they've got a problem, you're their representative. I think it was Oscar Wilde that said that a person is elected on their subjectivity, not their objectivity. And you have to listen to people. And even if you disagree with them, you're going to end up learning more about the situation, even if you disagree. So I would, if somebody called up and they had a problem, if I did not disagree with it, I would certainly look into it and see what the problem was, you know, and get back to them about it. And if there was something I could do about it that was in my belief structure, then I certainly would try to do that.
Okay.
You know.
A couple of these, Steve, are about legislation that has since passed, but you know, history has a way of repeating itself quite often, and some of these things may eventually come back, such as this one now. Another man has written in and wants to know your position on the Second Amendment. These, for viewers, these sound very similar. They are similar. When we got them from these folks, they just said, you know, these are for all the candidates that you have on. But anyway, back to the question. Wants to know your position on the Second Amendment. Also wants to know your position on concealed carry in the state of Wisconsin.
The Second Amendment, I don't know how clear it could be. Shall not be infringed. I am pro-gun.
Okay.
And it's that cut and dry. And these people who wrote this just came out of a conflagration that lasted over 20 years with the British, and they put it in there for a reason. On the conceal and carry thing in this state, the way that it came down to me in this last legislative thing, it looked to me as if it was an unfunded mandate, and that was my main real problem with this. And it's not just conceal and carry. For me, it's all the issues that affect us on an individual basis, whether it's something like physician-assisted suicide, the gay marriage, the pro-choice, conceal and carry. The decisions that we make as private individuals, as citizens of this country, in my opinion, the government should not be involved in this. These decisions are many times very hard and difficult. The physician-assisted suicide, the pro-choice, are very difficult. A person who decides that they can go through the 30-some hours of training to obtain a permit for a weapon, if they feel that they need that in their life, whether it be a woman who's threatened, whether it be a man who's threatened, whether it be somebody who carries a lot of cash, and they don't feel good about it, that's their choice. And I believe that that's an individual choice, and I don't believe that the government should be screwing around in there at all, quite frankly.
Okay. Would you support a statewide smoking ban like they have in California and 5 other states?
Well, I smoke. And this again comes down to this same situation. I think what happened here in Oshkosh was wrong. And even though I smoke, it's not because I smoke that I disagree with it. I look at the businesses that went out of their way to set up non-smoking situations. If a community feels that strongly that you have 80 or 90% of people voting one way in a community, then that's a valid situation. If you want to set up a community like that in Idaho or whatever it is, and they have that like in Boulder now. You have fines in Boulder, Colorado for smoking in your car. And I know people that got busted for it.
Wow.
And the police see you smoking in your car, pull you over. That was an overwhelming mandate from that community. I will never live in Boulder.
I was just going to say, you can't even smoke in your car.
You can't smoke in your car. But if that's what the community wants to do, that's one thing. On a statewide level, once again, I'm more for local control. If you want to do this on a local level, you know, the town of Rosendale decides that, you know, we're not going to have any more beer, no more cigarettes, and then that's what we're going to do. That's a local issue, and it should be left to the local people to decide that.
But don't you think it sort of pits one community against another, Steve? If one community does go for such a ban, but you know, Rosendale or whatever down the road, they don't, or a like-sized city down the road, they don't go along with it. Doesn't it sort of pit the businesses in those communities against each other?
You're seeing it right now. I know people that go down to Fond du Lac all the time.
To eat.
Yeah. You know, so you're right.
Then maybe they shouldn't have passed it and gave that thought.
Well, that would be one.
Because see, I just totally disagree with the whole statewide ban. I think that, first of all, you're not going to see a statewide ban because the legislators know just exactly how much money off the taxes of cigarettes they are reaping. You know, so we're already at such a huge deficit structure anyway that it would be asinine to presume that because they've lacked the collective courage to cut spending where they could have, and they've got a deficit, how on God's green earth are they going to eliminate these huge taxes from the cigarette smokers and create an even larger deficit? I don't like the idea either of the state going, well, from now on, this is how it's going to be in the entire state.
In my opinion, I thought one of the very few instances where a voluntary situation arises, I thought the smoking thing was effective, where you had no smoking in this area, or you just had no smoking at all in the establishment. And smokers themselves, I mean, you know, it's like, it's another common sense. You don't smoke in an elevator, you don't smoke in an airplane, you don't, you know, it's just, you use a little bit of common sense and courtesy with it, you know. And it seemed to work, but then, you know, this is another thing. There's a lot of causes out there, and I'm not going to agree with all of them, and I guess I'm more for local control.
Okay. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights, now obviously that was in the news a whole lot of late. It seems to be dead for now, but again, this may be one of these things that rears its ugly head again. Where does Steve Dedow weigh in on that particular issue, and why?
I had a number of speaking engagements just because of what I said on that issue, and we'll try to keep a little bit tamed down on it. I'm absolutely against it on this. For number one, it locks in tax codes where they are right now. The business taxes haven't changed since 1983, period. You've got tax exemptions in there for Lambeau Field skyboxes. You can't buy a forklift and use it and take the tax exemption unless you use it infrequently. And you and me have a business, we buy a forklift, right? We can only use it 32 hours a week. Otherwise, we can't take that tax exemption. I think that we should completely overhaul the tax codes the way that they are, seal up these stupid exemptions, make something, especially for small business, that they can understand, and then leave it in place for like 3 or 4 years so they don't have to sit there and go through the hoops every year. A constitutional amendment is ridiculous, but even on a more personal level, what I don't like about Tabor is that if you don't have the guts to stand up and say what it is you think needs to be cut or what you think needs to be added, then why the hell are you down in Madison? Why the hell did you bother to run? If you're that gutless, you're going to sit there. I didn't want to cut those things, but Tabor made me cut them. And you know that they'll do that.
Yes. Yes.
One other thing, and then I'm going to toss it back to Mel. You had sent out a press release that you are a big proponent of pay parity for women in the state of Wisconsin. You'd like to see Wisconsin, you know, get to the point where we are a leader in pay parity for women. Can you just share with the viewers and with Melanie and I how you would go about doing that?
Well, the irony here is that Wisconsin, 1921, first state to actually recognize women's equality, and now I believe we're 37th. You know, we're close to the bottom 10. I'd like to see us in the top 10 of equality as far as pay within the next 4 years. I think we can do it. There's equal wage laws on the books. They need to be enforced. Period. Some of the problem here is that women are grouped in what is considered women's jobs, where it would be like fast food manufacturing, and men are in this too, you know. And so the pay is always lower than this. If you were to sit there and look at other forms of employment, women are grouped into these, and it can be because of, you know, just the family thing, part-time jobs, this kind of stuff. One of the things that we can do to change that is to give different status right now to limited term employees to make so that they get a better wage, period. I mean, on the equality thing, what the numbers I read were $146 a week less that women are getting right now than men. And this is in similar positions. This is against the law, and this should be enforced. 146 bucks a week equates to $4,000 a year, and this is a family issue. This is not a woman's issue.
Right.
$4,000 more you could be having in your family's income right now. I mean, let's face it, out of over 2/3 of the families right now have double income earners in them. And
so why is this such a problem? I mean, is it because the enforcement is such an issue? I mean, how do you go about enforcing this?
Well, that's a good point. A lot of where a lot of this concentrated on. It's like in fast foods. It's like in libraries. It's like in retail, and things that we look at that are always on the bottom end of where the money is. It's the low end. Manufacturing's on the higher end, and this is on the low end. And there's an overabundance of women in these jobs. They go out and they get hired here because
they have to work around children's school schedules, and if there's a plethora of reasons why that happens.
Yeah.
So my question here is okay, we've all identified that this is a problem. I mean, sitting legislators right now, we have females in the Wisconsin state legislature who know very well that this is a problem, and yet you hear them come out saying there's no such thing as the glass ceiling, we don't really have this problem, we need to support curbs so that men can't go in and go to the same health spas as us. I mean, this is what's frustrating as a woman to me, is that the female legislators that we have can't identify with us, or are choosing not to identify with us, and I don't understand why that would be.
They're trying to run into the big old boy network. They're trying to run with the guys up there, and that's in my opinion.
So you just simply ignore the fact that there are issues that not only affect a specific gender who happens to have this placated upon them, but as you said, Steve, this is a family issue.
Absolutely, $300. We got a $300 rebate from Bush. I mean, we paid our power bill. I don't even think we got a full week's grocery out of the deal. $4,000 a year.
That's a lot of money.
Now, my wife is in a union. She's in the same union as I am, and she gets paid the exact same wage that I do if she's doing the exact same job that I do. And I've got seniority that towers over hers.
But now here's the thing. I'm a non-union worker.
Right.
And in many small businesses, they have seen to it that there's not enough employees hired so that you can't even fall into the Family Leave Act.
Right.
They make sure that they are just good enough to you and keep the employment low enough so that you can't start a union.
Right.
Okay. So what do you do with people that fall into that abyss that you don't have a union, you can't get a union started? Where government should come in and start enforcing these laws, and it's a matter of fairness and equity and family issue, they're just dropping the ball. They're just totally acting as though they don't hear, see, but hey, let's make sure we get the cell phone bill that passes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Although it didn't pass.
Well, yeah, they'll work on it again, I'm sure.
She may bring it back.
Oh, of course.
Well,
what you're saying makes total sense here, and that's part of my platform here is the tax incentive thing and the accountability thing, right? If we're going to give tax incentives out, let's give them the tax incentives to businesses that want to comply with laws the way that they are. Let's give them an incentive to actually help the working class here, because like you were saying before, the blue collar thing, these are the people that really create the wealth in this country. These are the people that create the products. These are the people that produce the food. These are the people that teach the kids. These are the people that should be getting the compensation here. Not the people who come in from 3M, and I'm not raking on 3M, but just if they came in, the CEO has no idea what a leach company does or whatever. All of a sudden he's the CEO and he's got all kinds of stock options and this other stuff, making 451 times the average employee. Why are we giving incentives to these kind of things?
Right.
It always is to this has got to stop. We got to start looking at incentives, and I believe we can do this with enforcement, with tax incentives, with changes in the way that like limited term employee or part-time employees are looked at, that they should be getting a higher level because the employers are playing a big game with part-time employees. They'll run them for 32 hours or 38 hours, never let them get into overtime. This Bush overtime thing is ridiculous. Now this is going to affect women even worse.
Absolutely.
Because it's going to go into the retail situation, you know, and now what? Now you're taking away their overtime.
Well, and people have to understand, when we're losing this manufacturing base, you know, we keep hearing from the Bush administration and even our local leadership, well, don't worry, because the employment situation really isn't that bad. But what they've replaced these good paying jobs with is low paying retail jobs. You cannot feed a family on $5 an hour.
No.
You can't feed a family what the car hop's making at $2 an hour, and God help me, I hope you give me a tip.
I mean, $7 an hour, that's what they're talking about, raising the minimum wage to it. Think about that, you know, 40 hours with $280, and then take your taxes out, you're looking at about a little under $800 a month, you know?
Yeah.
And how, you know, if you've got a child or something like that,
and then take out any insurance that you're going to have to pay for, because let me tell you, the employers aren't kicking in what they want to get out from under because their backs are breaking from the insurance.
Absolutely, and the thing that the taxpayers aren't seeing is, you know, we're picking up the tab on this.
Yes.
You know, Thompson says, yeah, there is a national health care system. If you or me or Cheryl is hurt, no hospital will not allow us to come in there and get fixed. Well, that's not the point.
You pay dearly for it. You'll get bills, and
Yes.
if you don't pay the bills, they'll get turned over to collections.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, he wants to try and convince people that we've got something like Germany or Canada, and quite honestly, we don't, and I think most people know that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the wage parity thing to me is, I mean, it is something that I've been speaking about for a number of years because I believe in it. And I believe in it because it would help families, it would help people, and for God's sakes, I mean, equality with women, I mean,
Well,
it's
just
been, you know.
fair is fair, and I mean, you
Yes.
know, if I can run a jackhammer as well as a guy, not
Yes.
saying that I can, God knows, you know, because you know what's going to happen. I'm going to, get down here and run this thing. But you know, if I'm doing everything that is expected out of my male counterparts, and all things being equal, I should get the same pay.
Yes.
But here's what happens in small businesses. It's don't ask, don't tell. You never ask your male counterparts, so when are you getting paid? Because they won't tell you, because you know full well it's this big, deep, dark secret, and you've got nowhere to go. There's no one to talk to and try to prove it.
Yeah.
Try to prove any kind of discrimination.
I really do. I believe that that's something that we can hammer on, you know, and it just depends on what we want to focus on as far as like, do we want to sit there and go after whatever it is with our Justice Department? You know, I think Lautenschlager is going after a lot of interesting things with the environmental issues, and I applaud her for it. You know, this is something else maybe she should be looking at, you know, but.
Speaking of the environment and things like that, we used to have a public intervener.
I support it completely.
Okay, so you do believe in restoring the public intervener and having them be non-political, and
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, you've got a person here who's supposed to be looking after our welfare, who right now is appointed by a politician who's just paying back somebody, you help me out, I'll put you on, in charge of the DNR or whatever. That's what is that? I mean,
It's kind of like hiring a consultant. Like when the city hires a consultant and they say, tell us what you found. Well, the consultant knows
Yes.
full well you're writing the check. I damn well better find what you want me
better
to find
something.
if I ever want another job like this
Yep.
again. I mean, we are not naive people.
Once again, the taxpayers pick it up, though.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You had discussed earlier talking about open meetings, and that you feel very strongly that state legislators should be following the same rules and regulations that are placed upon the locals, the county, cities, villages, and so forth. I was not aware that they were not doing that. Do you have examples or instances that you can cite of open
Tabor.
meetings law? And that legislation would be a way to...
No, the stuff with like Tabor, where they had a 24-hour notice or something, city of Oshkosh, the town of Rosendale, whatever, has got to have a notice in the paper.
Correct.
And some of the things, the legislation that comes out of Madison right now, they'll have a 24-hour notice for the public to come up. And Tabor was one of those things. And there's been other instances like that where there's so little public input in it because nobody realizes it's happening until the last second. Now, are they complying with the law? Yes, they're complying with the law. But the thing is that they're just, it's just not the same thing. They're playing with it.
Well, 24 hours on state legislation where an entire state or an entire district can be affected by it,
Right.
versus 24 hours for your city
Right.
of 62,000 people versus,
Yeah. It's a different thing as well.
It's a much more difficult aspect to get the entire state notified in 24 hours versus your city.
Right, absolutely. Well, these towns take this very seriously, and this ruling came down, and rightly so. My understanding is that there was it might have been Lake Geneva, that's what I want to say, they'd have a public forum right at the beginning of their meetings and stuff. And apparently if somebody brought something up at the public forum, they would vote on it right then. And that's not, it's like, this road over here is really bad. Let's put a new one in, vote on it. And you can't do that.
No.
It has to be an established agenda, right?
Yeah. No.
So the things came down again that, listen, you need to do this.
It's really kind of unfortunate because that's probably the only form of government where things get actually done as soon as you bring them up.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
it's kind of sad to discourage that, as long as somebody is willing to act upon it. But in order to protect people's property rights and things, you really got to give them a chance.
Steve, we're just about running out of time, and I want to give you, about 45 seconds to close things out. But in about, another 45 seconds, just briefly tell us, if you're elected, what kinds of things are you first going to tackle when you get down to Madison?
The SAMA thing, Save American Manufacturing Revolution. I'd also like to do the Family Farm Act, which was adopted by the Wisconsin Farmers Union, which tells me our agricultural policies are on track. Also, I think that a transparency law as far as health care providers is necessary. In other words, I go into a business, we see something we like, and we just say, I'll take that. You walk out of the thing. A couple of weeks later, they come back and they say, well, that'll be $1,400 for that flint roller brush that you took. Nowhere else do we not know what things cost when we go in. The doctors don't know what it's going to cost you. You don't know what it's going to cost you. And then on top of that, nobody knows how much your insurance is going to pick up. I would like to see healthcare providers have to establish a cost for procedure on an internet situation so that people can compare to the shop. I think that would be one of the things that I would tackle first. I'd also like to get in this gender wage equity thing.
Okay. We're running out of time. In about 10 seconds, tell people why they should vote for you in September.
Well, I think the reason you should vote for me in September is because I'm not a career politician, that I'm bringing in some new ideas, that I am a citizen candidate, that the ideas that I bring are from you. These are the things that people are talking to me about when I'm out knocking on doors or attending some function. It's not like, I'm kowtowing to some special interest groups to get things done.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
We got to wrap up. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks,
and
Steve.
We'll be talking again. And thank you folks very much for joining us. As always, it's been a pleasure. For Melanie Bloechl, I'm Cheryl Hentz. Take good care, and we'll see you next time. Until then, keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.